Hello, and welcome to the Voices in Action podcast. I am your host, Lily Mott. This podcast is co-produced by the National Lottery Community Fund and Be the Change Media Network, and it is all about youth social action, what it means, why it matters, and the incredible young people driving change in their communities. Youth social action is all about young people finding their voice, standing up for what matters to them, and creating positive change. It's at the heart of the I Will movement, which is a UK-wide campaign that empowers young people to take social action and make a difference. Recently, the National Lottery Community Fund launched the latest round of the I Will Fund to support projects that give even more young people the chance to lead change. In this second episode of the Voices in Action podcast, I am joined by Dame Julia Cleverdon and Sophia Badhan to talk about the I Will movement and the I Will Fund. Dame Julia Cleverdon is the chair of the National Lottery Community Fund and a passionate, practical campaigner who has gained an international reputation for connecting the unconnected. She inspires individuals and organizations to work together for the common good. She has consistently championed cross-sector collaboration in the most disadvantaged communities, supported community leaders, encouraged young people's engagement, and helped to create a more robust civil society. Her work has consistently valued diversity, sustainability, and solutions that work at a local level. Sophia Badhan has been an I Will ambassador since 2019. She is a youth activist and a TEDx speaker based in Birmingham. She recently graduated with a BA in European Languages and Cultures, majoring in politics with minors in German and Global Development Studies. Sophia is also a youth collaborator on the National Youth Strategy, announced in November last year. Sophia, Dame Julia, welcome to the podcast. What an incredible introduction for both of you. And I'm sure that we just kind of scraped the surface. So thank you so much for joining me to talk on the podcast today. I would love to start with Sophia, and then we'll come over to you, Dame Julia. But Sophia, beyond that short introduction, can you please tell me a little bit more about your involvement in youth social action? Where did it all begin for you?
Cool. Okay. Hi. So my youth social action journey, I think, started in, I'd say, 2018. And so I was inpatient in a mental health hospital. And when I was discharged, I decided that the mental health services at my school just weren't good enough, and they weren't supporting young people the way they needed and deserved to be supported. So I launched a campaign to coincide with Eating Disorders Awareness Week. And it was with BEAT, the UK's eating disorder charity, and the campaign was Stock It to Eating Disorders. So I stood up in front of the whole school. I was terrified. I'd just been discharged, so I wasn't really used to being around people. And I can't really remember what I said, but I must have said something about my story and my journey and the importance of raising awareness of eating disorders and talking about it in educational settings. And I'd say that is the presentation that really kind of kicked off my social action journey. A lot of people came to me afterwards and just thanked me for actually talking about it and being so open and honest. And that really was, I'd say, the catalyst for me starting to use my lived experiences to create change and make a meaningful difference.
That is wonderful. That was so beautiful. Thank you, Sophia. And of course, I'm sure then that led to being part of the I Will movement, which we'll talk about a little bit more. Dame Julia, over to you. Can you tell us about your involvement in youth social action and your background in all of this work?
Well, I suppose I'm very old, 75, and now with the honour of chairing the National Lottery Community Fund. In a way, what brought me into the world I've been in for much of my professional life was the intersection between communities, businesses, young people, customers, and all the ways in which governments of the day, local governments, interested activists, how does it all connect? And so after a career running business in the community, I began to work very closely with both youth organisations and particularly with those who were trying to raise the game in the most important, poorest communities in Britain about how did we get schools to really attract and engage the best talent as teachers. And that led me into both some international understanding of the work that Teach for America had done, led by Wendy Kopp, of bringing in people who never thought they were going to be teachers, but actually were very passionate about their subject, that loved science, adored maths, really wanted other people to understand the excitement of Shakespeare or whatever it was. And I, with a great colleague, Brett Vigdorts, set up something called Teach First. And from 2003, I helped to drive the movement to attract great talent to be great teachers in the poorest communities in England and then later in Wales. And what those Teach Firsters came back and said to us is that these young people they were teaching were incredible. They had such passion, such energy. Whatever we'd been doing in the education system had actually produced not everybody, but many people who wanted to make a greater difference. And at the same moment, I was at that moment working for the Prince of Wales with all his charities. And I think Tony Blair and the Labour crew had been in for quite a long time, actually, 1997 to 2012, 13. And halfway through that, they began in the Labour government to look at what were they doing about getting young people involved in their communities. And they'd set up something called V Inspired, and they were beginning to drive, we need more what we would now call youth voice. We didn't, I think, understand that was what we were talking about. But the sorts of examples that Sophia has given of, why were schools not encouraging their young people to be more involved in the issues of the day, to campaign for what they believed in, to say this mattered. Scotland seemed to be rather ahead of the curve. They were doing some interesting things, Scotland. Wales were busily thinking about passing laws which would require you to understand what the impact was on future generations. And then the Labour Party were out, the Tory Party came in, and they had a new idea that they were going to set up something called National Citizen Service. And I got slightly involved in that, and the Prince of Wales was interested to hear about this. And anyway, it so happened that Mr. Cameron, the Prime Minister of the day, asked me to produce a review on what did I think would help to make all the boats rise of the youth organisations, not just National Citizen Service, but everybody. And I said, having with a great girlfriend of mine, Amanda Jordan, we'd sat in the basement of the Treasury for 6 months producing this report. I said, look here, you've got to unleash the power of young people. You've got to get them to be the change. Stop thinking what you're going to do to young people. Get young people to say what they're going to do for themselves. And it was a slightly revolutionary idea. And particularly, I said, we've got to get more opportunities in schools and in communities for young people to be supported, where they need that support, to be involved. Whether you do it through education, which is the most democratic way of doing it, because by and large everybody's in education. So what do schools actually do to support their young people? Or whether you do it in communities, because great members of the Scouts or the Youth Club or the, Save the Bus Stop. I don't mind. I'm cause agnostic. I don't give a damn what you campaign for. But we must do more. And that then led to the launch, led by, I have to say, the Prince of Wales, as he then was, now the King, to convene all the different political party leaders, Mr. Cameron, Mr. Clegg, and Mr. Miliband, all tipped up at Buckingham Palace with 50 young people and said, we're launching the I Will campaign. And we had a tiny team of brilliant campaigners, Charlotte Hill, all sorts of great people came together, and a great trustee board, Matt Hyde of the Scouts, and incredible 6 brilliant young trustees who I keep in touch with to this day, Saeed, all sorts of great people. Lovely girl from Football Beyond Borders, Salon. And together, over the next 8 years or so, we shaped how would you get many more young people involved in the community, in their own social action and in supporting and campaigning for things they minded about. And each year we appointed, I think, 80 I Will ambassadors, which I'm thrilled to hear, Lily, you were one of when you were in Cardiff. And Sophia obviously was as part of the school that she and the campaign she led. And for me, it's been a transformational experience. It began because Teach First has told us how clever this generation was and that they weren't being given enough opportunity. And it then went, as usual, into a sort of government reason where, governments can do great things sometimes and can help to change behaviour. And I think that was something that, interestingly, a partnership between civil society, the future king, and the politicians did change. And we haven't done it all, but by God, we've got more energy out there than we did have. So that's me.
That was wonderful. What an intro. I think it was so nice to hear the background of the I Will movement, because I think we hear a lot about what it is now, and it's pretty complicated to understand the different parts. And hearing how it got started and hearing about that story, I was just sitting there like it was an inspiring story time. That was wonderful. I think now is the perfect time to ask you, Sophia, a little bit about your experience as an I Will ambassador. What opportunities have you taken advantage of as an I Will ambassador? What has it meant to you to be part of that community? Tell me a little bit about that for you.
So I became an IOL ambassador in 2019. I remember the tiny office and the OG Step Up to Serve team. It was truly, I can't even put into words. I'm going to try not to get emotional because I will has really completely opened up so many opportunities to me and basically gave me a driver and a reason to recover. People had always kind of said, oh, recover for, your future self, for your family, for your friends. And all of these reasons seemed really wishy-washy to me. I was never really able to I didn't really want to recover. And then the I Will movement came into my life and I met the most incredible group of people, young people and older people who cared about what young people had to say and who believed in the power of youth and who wanted to see young people on trustee boards at high levels, just kind of really in the positions of power. And it opened up a whole new world to me. And I think it did really give me a reason to recover because I knew that I loved doing what I did with I Will, and I couldn't do that if I wasn't well. So I decided to stay well so that I could keep meeting incredible people, talking about my experiences, using my lived experience to try and improve services, championing youth voice, creating meaningful change. The I Will movement is really a family to me. The I Will campaign, I Will movement, whatever it is now. I've kind of seen it go through all its stages, and it's been a beautiful thing to watch and to be a part of. And I still keep in touch with kind of all of the original gang. And it's so lovely just to know that there's something that connects all of us. It's like a family, and I Will ambassadors are some of my best friends. So I'm incredibly grateful to this movement and to this campaign for, I guess, well, for everything, really. Yeah.
I love that. That is so wonderful. You talked about it a little bit, but I think I would love to know. I know personally that you've been all over the place doing so many different things as I Will ambassador. What is your proudest achievement? I would say probably the proudest achievement would be this family and this community that you've developed. But what is another achievement that you are really proud of as an I Will ambassador? And why do you think back on that achievement and why does it make you proud?
So you're right, definitely the people I've met and the connections I've made are so special to me and I will treasure them forever. It's really given me a renewed hope in humanity and young people and the power of connection. But I'd say one of my proudest achievements is a little bit of a throwback. It's back to COVID times. So during COVID, I was part of a very small group. I think there were 4 or 5 of us working with Public Health England and the UK government, working to basically rework the government's COVID-19 guidelines in a format, in a language that was accessible for young people and all young people. So we came up with lots of different versions, different formats, we really looked at the official guidance word for word and really dissected it and kind of broke down what it would mean in tangible terms to a young person. What does 2 meters look like? Is that 2 steps? Is it what is that? And really through, and we were also part of a campaign that essentially reframed the narrative around young people and challenged these stereotypes of young people being irresponsible and kind of not caring for guidelines and not really contributing to this big societal effort that came about with COVID, and actually spotlighted young people who were young carers, who were immunocompromised, who were doing incredible things in their communities to protect the people that they cared about. That was an incredible campaign, especially during such a difficult time. All of our meetings were via Zoom, and it taught me a lot about kind of adaptability because we would have these meetings and we'd reword all of the guidance and we'd say, right, it's done. And then the next day, the government would change the guidelines and we would have to start all over again. But it was incredible. I think that experience, how intense and how close knit it was with just a few of us ambassadors and some representatives from NHS England, Public Health England, and the government, it really meant a lot to me that we were doing something in such a difficult time for young people to try and make it just a little bit more bearable. So I'd say that's my proudest moment.
I can endorse that, Lily, because while Sophia was talking, I just typed it into this incredible search machine, and up has come the note from Lily Mott and Sean and all that team who were working with Trevor Pears, who's been such a great supporter of I Will. And it says in here, it really seems to be gaining traction that the I Will ambassadors have a vital role as community health champions. And that was in
Absolutely.
August 2020. And that now, just looking at the way in which the NHS is, I think, still struggling, but still clear about the importance of getting young people as the voices of those who have both had experience in the NHS and have views and experience as to what we should do better. So you played a really important role at that moment, my love, really key, and go on doing so.
That's amazing. I think for me, the common thread, I've gotten to meet a lot of I Will ambassadors and I've gotten to chat with a lot of them through being an I Will ambassador, but also through other work that I do. And I think such a common thread is the passion for I Will, but then I also think being leaders. I think everyone does it in a different way. And the social action that they do is different, but everybody is a leader in some form. So, Sophia, can you tell me about a time that you helped someone in your community take their first steps into youth social action? Why was this important to you, and what was the result of bringing them into social action or helping them to understand their own social action?
So as young people, I think it's important to recognize that young people already have a voice. We don't need to be given a voice. We already have a voice. It's about giving young people the tools and the skills and the opportunities with which they can kind of harness this voice and this power and create change. And when I say create change, I don't necessarily mean changing the world. It took me quite a long time to realize that I didn't have to change the world. I just had to change my world, whether that's my community or I don't know, a local group that I attend. That is my world and that's enough. I think I've spoken to so many incredible young people over the years. And I think it's just about saying that not everyone has to be kind of this trailblazing, groundbreaking, new, innovative thing or person. There are so many incredible initiatives already out there. Social action isn't always just about being the founder or a CEO or starting up a new thing. It's about reaching out to the networks that already exist and strengthening those. I think that's something that's taken me a while to realize as well, being around people who always introduce themselves as like the founder of this and I started this. I'm like, cool. But there is power in solidarity, in numbers, in support, in community. So I think I just always say to any young people who kind of me. I kind of fell into this social action thing. So I'm not really sure how I got here anyway, to be honest. But it's just as long as you have a mission and you're doing something that you care about, it doesn't matter on what scale you make change because change is change.
That's awesome. Thank you, Sophia. So, Dame Julia, I know that many I Will ambassadors are grateful for a lot of the funding and the support that's been provided by the National Lottery Community Fund and the government since 2016. How did the I Will Fund come about? We're kind of switching gears here because, of course, we are spotlighting the I Will Fund because applications are open when this podcast comes out. What is the I Will Fund? How does it complement the wider I Will movement? Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I suppose I won't do too much of a history lesson, but I think Charlotte Hill and I were pretty clear that there was money in bits of government departments and in the lottery, which I didn't know very much about at that moment. I'm always a great believer in how do you make more money go further by getting other people to come behind a good idea. Can you get more collaboration as opposed to more, fracturing? So I think it was probably Charlotte. She was very clever at it all. She said, look, I think Department of Culture, Media and Sport, who were, of course, the very important department dealing largely with young people, I think they've got some money they'd be prepared to put in to how do you get more young people supported and engaged to, as you say, they've got a perfectly good voice, just megaphone it and get it out there and get people to believe more in themselves and what they can achieve. So I think we picked up 20 million from Department of Culture, Media and Sport, managed to match it with the lottery, who were also rather keen at that moment on what could they do. And then they rather cleverly said to us, but now you've got to match all of that. So Charlotte and I set out with some slight hysteria to say, how do we find another 40 million to match this? But that was a really big fund, and it gave us the opportunity, slightly challenging triumvirate operation, but the brilliant co-founder with me, Amanda Jordan, took on and chaired it to begin with. And we had a lovely general called Sir Nick Parker, who was very powerful indeed and never stopped explaining firmly to government departments what they needed to remember. But we got it up and running, and great philanthropists and trusts and foundations came in to match the money. And that was really helpful because the more you can spread the responsibility for this, the more you suddenly realize that, I don't know, St. John's, for instance, who've got the most brilliant set of I Will ambassadors, just amazing girl, who I love dearly. They actually produce 25% of the paramedics who ever go in to the ambulance service. Who knew that? So anybody who wants to get in to be a paramedic, go and do, football aid at the St. John ambulance. They brought money in. Trevor Pears, the Pears Foundation, brought money in. The Wildlife Trust brought money in. And each time they came in with a particular interest as to what they wanted to do. The Co-op were really concerned about loneliness, and they ran a whole great stream of I Will Fund asking for people who knew what to do about loneliness. UK Youth and British Red Cross and others came in with Empower Her, which was a very clever way of getting young women to be more confident about their power, basically. So lots of interesting, ingenious stuff. Leonard Cheshire came in on a big disability piece of work to get young people, wheelchair users and others, to be much more powerful. And I don't know whether that was how we found George Fielding, but George Fielding, an incredible ambassador. Absolutely. So, as Sophia said, it became a family in which you connected people. And this went on running, and Tessie Ojo came in to chair the I Will Fund, and each time they had to have 6 evenly matched I Will young people to take the decisions about where the money should go. And that was a very major part of what we were trying to achieve. We were trying to say, don't hand money out to young people without young people's involvement in where that money should go. And Virgin Money, one of the great lots with Nancy, a fantastic chief exec in the Northeast, Virgin Money became the first lot to really start to change how they handed their own money out as a result of their involvement in I Will. So this went rolling on, and as ever, lots of government change and lots of ministers and more people who, some of them understood it and some of them did not. But we managed, thanks to the lottery, actually, to cling on to the I Will fund. And then, of course, I'm so conflicted it's hardly possible, even though I'm the chair, so I keep having to be sent out of the room every time we discuss, shall we recapitalise the I Will fund? And thank heavens, in my absence while I stood in the corridor, they decided that yes, they would. And this new 20 million coming down the pipe now is to do very much the same, but is, of course, helped by all the experience that's gone before. It's, I think, for under 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds with special needs or particular circumstances, but it is aiming at quite the younger age of it all, I think. We learnt very early on from a great lot at the Jubilee Trust that the earlier young people start on social action, the more likely it is to be in their lives. So actually, some of our experience is that what's happening in primary schools, and particularly that cusp between sort of 10 and 12, those are really important moments. Church of England did a big piece of work on what are primary schools doing, working in their communities. Learnt a lot. Ormiston, big education trust, they've done a fantastic piece of work on how do you get and support young people in schools to be really connected to this. So I think and hope the I Will Fund, the new launch of it, is learning from what we've learned in the past, a lot of evaluation, a lot of good stuff that has come through. And sometimes, of course, you get it wrong and you say, oh, God, I'm so sorry, what a nightmare. But you've got to be, you've got to say that did not work well. And this is the direction. So that's why I'm thrilled we've re-announced the new launch of the I Will Fund.
Dame Julia, you answered like 3 of my questions with that. That was perfect. So thank you.
Sorry.
No, that makes my job easy. What would a successful youth-led project look like to you? I think you did a great job of segueing me that way, but when you say reevaluating and some of the past projects that have been funded through the I Will Fund, what does that successful youth-led project in your mind, what is that like?
Well, I think Sophia makes such a great point that the danger is that this is seen as a sort of hero-heroine operation, single-handedly alone against the forces that are trying to keep us down. Actually, doing some great things to make older people's lives better in a care home because a group of young people say, shall we take a performance or a play or a debate or a cake we baked? Should we do something with those who actually we don't know much about and we'd love to learn? And they're our neighbours. And in the end, communities are about neighbours. Now, for me, great projects led by young people are where young people call the shots. They say what they're going to do, why they want to do it, and they sort out how it's going to happen. What are not great youth-led projects is when some aged old codger has decided it would be a good idea if we played Scrabble with the vicar or we raised money for, saving hippopotamuses or something or other. And, young people don't have anything to do with it. So I don't mind what they do. I do like us to learn and reflect on what we learnt as a result. And, the 6 great principles which have underpinned the old I Will Fund. I'm not sure I can be as clever as you lot can on rattling my way through them, but they are double benefit. There is a benefit to the young person and there's a benefit to the community. They are reflective. You really do think through, what did I learn out of all of that? Because reflection is one of the, I'm always being told I'm the least reflective person anybody's ever met, but I do try occasionally to think, why did I get that so wrong? What did I say which wasn't helpful? So I think it is a real learning opportunity. I think it's helpful if it's a bit time-bound. If you say by the end of April, we're going to try and do something about this. If it drifts on forever, there's no way out. I think trusted adults can sometimes help put a bit of wisdom in and say, yeah, well, it help if you have a budget before you begin, And some of it is very much part of an existing organisation. Incredible stuff being done by a marvellous group of young cubs on the way to attend the women's rugby that I went to the other day. And they were offering face painting with roses for anybody walking down the thing. And I said, whose idea was this? It was Tim's, they all say. And quite obviously Tim had just decided we could make some money round Wembley face painting. Brilliant, Tim. Where was the money going? Well, it was going towards the residential. Good, lovely. So some of it is inside organisations which know a bit. Some of it is just because someone who's had a tough experience thinks that they could help other people. And in the end, it's the sharing of the experience which makes so much Oz. But it's young person to young person. It's not, those of us who've been about for a very long time. Does that answer your question?
Definitely does. That was awesome. I'm going to switch gears a little bit because I want to talk about the National Youth Strategy. Sophia, the work of I Will definitely complements and supports the government's National Youth Strategy, but you played a key role in developing the strategy. Can you tell me more about your role and the process to develop it? I'd love to know more about it. I feel like I see it on Instagram all the time, Instagram and LinkedIn, but tell me about what your role was in the National Youth Strategy.
So I was there's 10 of us in total. We are the youth collaborators for the National Youth Strategy. We represent the regions that we're from, and essentially our role is to hold the government accountable, which is a very interesting place to be. We ensure that the National Youth Strategy is what it says on the tin. It is for young people. It reflects the needs of young people all across the country, not just kind of in London or in Birmingham, but young people from all different communities, all different backgrounds, of all different abilities everywhere, essentially in England. So it's been a very interesting process working with DCMS. It's been incredible, just this collaboration of civil service and youth charity has been amazing. And it's been really interesting to actually get to talk to young people. So our role is, or was essentially as youth advisors and kind of helping with the research. So going out, hosting these events, facilitating these conversations with young people, holding democracy cafes and hackathons, and talking to young people about the issues that matter to them and what they would want to see in their youth strategy. So it's been amazing to kind of be that bridge, and it's been a privilege. Yeah, I've really, really enjoyed it.
That's amazing. Thank you, Sophia. I think when I got to talk with Henry, he said that was one of the biggest privileges of his life. So incredible. I've only heard good things about the National Youth Collaborators. I think that's amazing. Dame Julia, so how is the National Lottery Community Fund ensuring that its mission to support young people aligns with and remains responsive to the upcoming National Youth Strategy? Of course, it's upcoming, so I don't know how much you can necessarily say yet, but can you tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a really important, brave and bold decision by Lisa and Andy. I think they've carried it out pretty impressively. 20,000 young people involved. By and large, I test it by wandering about in Great Yarmouth or Blackpool or Ipswich, where there's tremendous I Will town, and Blackpool also an I Will town, largely thanks to Stephen Skeet, who's done an amazing job with many young I Willers to get this more socialised. And when you look at the, endless democracy cafes and the hackathons and Dan Laws and George Fielding and hundreds of people out there, when they announced it was going to be, their survey was going to be called Deliver You, somebody rang me up and said, "Oh, Julia, we're very worried. Do you think Deliveroo will sue us?" So I said, well, luckily, the one thing this old co-founder can do is to ring up. I do know somebody in Deliveroo. Let me ring them up and say, A, you're not to sue them, and B, why the hell aren't you delivering their survey with every pizza? But I'm not quite sure they did that. But anyway, they were certainly fine. So I think it's been an absolutely great example of sucking up so much evidence and energy from young people about what they feel about their lives now and what they think across the whole gamut of everything that they're dealing with, what do they think the most important things are to do? Now, the actual launch of the strategy is not down the pipe quite yet, and we're in tough and straitened times. So, of course, many of the things, I suspect, expectations are high that we're going to be able to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and get free bus travel across the place, which would be, I keep saying I, as an old codger, would willingly give up my bus pass for 5 years if it meant that 17-year-olds to 23-year-olds had free buses. But that's probably something we've got to, I suspect, campaign for in the longest run. But I think there will be, from the strategic intent, there will be some important things to be done across government, because it's not just Department of Culture, Media and Sport. They have a very important role as the youth policy lead, but what schools do in the Department for Education, what the Health Service does, what the Department of Transport do. What was impressive about the strategy consultation, it was across government, whereas in the past sometimes it's what does the Department of Culture, Media and Sport think about what young people think, when actually what you need is what does everybody think in all bits of the government machine. So we in the National Lottery are absolutely alongside the strategy. We've been very involved in the conversations. We've been enormously impressed by the energy and the drive and the clarity and the realism of young people who've been involved about what could happen and what might happen and what we hope will happen. And now we wait to see the announcements. I mean, we are enormously privileged in the National Lottery so long as everybody keeps buying lottery tickets. Let me just make that point. The very, very best investment you could make. You might win some money, but you might not. But if you don't win it, you could be assured that, my God, we and my other colleagues in arts and sports and heritage are sending out a hell of a lot of money into the most important community frontline activities. And for us, I think we spend over 250 million a year on children and young people as one of our 4 big missions, bringing communities together, driving environmental change, absolutely critical, children and young people, and healthy living. So of those 4 things, all of which matter, I believe, to young people, we absolutely committed to picking up the strategy, seeing how it embeds with our particular lens, which is about the communities that need it most, an equity view, not giving it to those in places on the hill, whereas many, many of the communities that need the most help in the poorest places are where we prioritise expenditure and where we need young people's energy and drive to help change and make those places great places for their future.
That's amazing. I was just thinking as you were talking, I think we need to chop this up and send it to the National Lottery for like a radio ad or something. I think that was the best soundbite. They need to use that beyond this podcast. Sophia, I have one difficult closing question for you. This is a big one. What do you think is currently the biggest barrier to young people getting involved in social action? And what can we do to try to address this? I did warn, it's a big one. It's a tough one, but what are your thoughts?
This is definitely a difficult question. I think I would say that the biggest barrier that young people are facing is a kind of a lack of belief in themselves, in the idea that their voices will be heard and will mean something and will change something. I think with the environment that we've lived in over the past couple of years, people have been getting increasingly frustrated with the way things are working or not working. And as young people, it's really hard not to feel just like incredibly hopeless and kind of just be like, well, what's the point? It doesn't matter anyway. And I know that young people have the power to change the world, whatever scale of world that is, whether it's their world or the world. I know that young people have the passion and the drive and the optimism and the commitment to make things happen. We need to reignite that within a generation. We need to encourage young people to use their voice and to make a difference, to make a change on whatever scale, however small. It matters. Everything matters. and everything has, even the tiniest thing has an impact on other tiny little things, and it's a ripple effect. So I think that our generation at the moment is quite frustrated, and I think that's what's stopping young people from getting involved, this whole kind of, well, what's the point? And I think community has a big role to play in being the antidote to that. We need real, meaningful human connections, especially post-COVID. Online things just don't, they're not the same. And as humans, we need that human interaction. We need to feel heard and understood and listened to and loved by other humans. And that can only really happen in these in-person spaces, which is why I think third spaces and youth clubs and just general community things are so important in kind of reigniting the hope in young people.
That was wonderful, Sophia. Dame Julia, you have a bit of an easier one, actually, as my last question. Where can people find out more about the funding available through the I Will Fund? How can they find more information? I'll also link everything in the description, but one last shout out for the I Will Fund, if you will.
Well, I think really I'd say come onto the National Lottery website, National Lottery Community Fund website, type in I Will, and we'll take you straight, we hope, to the I Will Fund, how to apply. And we do have great funding officers all over the country who will, of course, want to help, reply to email, pick up a phone. The I Will operation is absolutely thrilled about this, and I think so are many of the youth organisations. So any of them will also help guide you in the direction of it. I mean, it's only 20 million, but that's 20 million more than we've had out for a bit. So I think it's going to be a very important part of how we are all running up towards the launch of the National Youth Strategy, which I do congratulate you, Sophia. You spoke absolutely beautifully then about what young people had said. And young people had said basically they wanted to be in communities together. Yeah. Humans need each other, and it can't all be done online in one's bedroom by oneself. You know, we need the creativity that comes from community. And at this moment, I think there isn't anything really much more important. And of course, you need great trusted adults, more youth workers, more great teachers, more great parents, more great carers. But in the end, it is stubborn hope that we will manage together to build Britain to where it can be. And it's been a tough few years for everybody, and particularly I think for the COVID generation. So we must redouble our efforts together. But Lily, thank you so much for doing this, because the National Lottery Community Fund is thrilled to have you as part of our partnership on podcasting, and it's been an honour to be part of it all.
Yeah, thank you guys. You're stealing my thank you, Dame Julia. Thank you both for joining me and for sharing your stories and your insights and your passion for the I Will movement, the I Will Fund, of course, and youth social action in general. I think both of your stories were incredible, and I think it's amazing to hear from an I Will ambassador and then someone who began the I Will campaign. It felt very full circle for me, so thank you both. For anyone listening, don't forget the new I Will Fund from the National Lottery Community Fund is open until the 19th of November. This is a huge opportunity, so check out the link in the description of this episode for more information about the fund. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. Make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join us for future episodes as we continue exploring youth social action, what it means, why it matters, and the incredible young people driving change in their communities. We'll see you next time. Thank you both again. Thanks so much for joining.
Well done, Lily. Well done, Sophia.
Thank you.